What's the most weird, terrifying confession you've heard from someone that was drunk? Bartender here. So many stories. Probably most terrifying is the woman who came into my bar years ago and had 2 shots and a drink and was real quiet for the first hour. Then she called me over and asked if I could call the police. I said what was the problem. She then told me that she had just stabbed and sliced the neck of a mugger in the alley and wanted to make sure he was dead first before she reported it. Note: police were called. Mugger found dead. Woman not arrested or charged. She denied ever telling me that she wanted to wait an hour before calling the police, claimed that she had passed out in the alley and woke up, then came into the bar in shock. That they steal money from passed out drunk hookups. That's the last time this person came to hang out at my place. My ex-boyfriend told me one night he moved here from Vietnam when he was 14 that his cousin is a gay prostitute and would fly to Hong Kong periodically to make bank. He'd slip something in his John's drink at the bar to make them go to sleep just before heading to the hotel room. They'd get to the hotel room. John would end up falling asleep. He'd empty out the wallet and take off. My now ex-girlfriend confessed to having to wipe Maya after I drunkenly took a dump during post-21st birthday shenanigans. Amuses me now, but I was embarrassed for a long time after. I work at a bar and our staff had a huge problem with heroin a couple years ago. It was to the point that management was regularly having to sweep the bathroom for needles. Anyway, one of the guys was a friend of mine and I thought he was an overall good guy despite his crippling addiction. One night we were having a few drinks after work and he got a little too drunk and admitted that a couple months prior he had bought stuff from someone he didn't know and didn't trust, so he called up a girl he'd used with before and told her he had stuff and could he come over. He let her go first and she immediately had a terrible reaction to whatever was in the drugs, seizing and ODing in front of him. He left her house without notifying the police or trying to help. He awed himself a couple months after. My uncle, who has always been an oasis of sanity and understanding in my family, got super f***ing drunk and told me he doesn't really care about anyone. Not even me. And that he fantasizes constantly about murdering everyone he loves. Starting with the people closest to him first. He would take his time doing it. I told him he'd been winning the fight against those thoughts every day for 40 years. And he'd been 100% successful so far. And tried to change the topic. He started laughing and started carrying on about how fun it would be to give in to those urges and how no one would be able to stop him, and he got so excited by it that he had to go sit out in the sub-zero weather at 3 a.m. on the porch for a couple minutes to calm down. He was really graphic with what he wanted to do to his sister, my mom, and told me that when he lived with my grandmother, he would sometimes stand over her while she slept thinking of how much he hated being around her and wishing he could smother her. He has had waking blackouts in the past, so I took this issue to my parents who have dealt with it before and haven't really been close to him since. I think he doesn't remember telling me any of this. My male best friend at the time confessed me while drunk that he wanted to abuse my female best friend and that just the idea of it made him hard. Since the only way to get to her was with my help, he insisted that it would be great for us 3 to go to a separate room. We were at a party. He said that while he was with her I could either watch or join them since I was also pretty FC cable, of course. I told him to go to hell. I grabbed my best friend and we both left the party. Needless to say, I broke ties with him and he can't get close to us. Not me, but a friend. He was out with a girl he didn't know too well and they got drunk. She said she was initiated into a gang. They just collected stray people they didn't know, took them to a warehouse, beat them up, and when they were thoroughly beaten, broken down, she and the other recruits administered an overdose of heroin, killing them. There are weird people out there, you need to be careful. Not long ago my friend was outside for a smoke at a small house party and a girlfriend of a mutual friend came up to him and decided to let him know that she had gotten an abortion earlier that week. She didn't even introduce herself. Just went straight to that. She had to vent. Was on leave from the army with some mates and met a fellow from an adjacent unit. We all proceeded to get good and drunk when the fellow from the other unit told us about how he fabricated an after-action report because he had killed a local and reported that he felt threatened. We discussed it the next day when sobering up and ran it up the chain of command. Turns out he never actually did what he claimed to do, but was probably thinking about it and described his plan to us in a way that made it sound like he'd already done it. About 2 weeks later, Scuttlebutt said that he was quietly sent to another base for reasons. My parents were both drunk and got in a fight which escalated their emotions apparently. And my stepdad had a mental breakdown due to the situation and came in my room to vent about it. And basically admitted to me that when he was 16 he got a girl pregnant and they had my stepbrother. And choked her during an argument. She didn't press charges because her mother said don't ruin his life over it. So that's how he got away with it. After that he started talking about how he's actually killed people and how he's really about that life. Spent his teenage years hustling and selling drugs and never got caught, 'cause he had a fake it or some shit. All the years I've known this guy we barely talked, and he threw all this at me one random night where I barely knew what was going on. Lol. My uncle told a bunch of strangers in a bar that if I wasn't his niece he would totally bang me. Bit awkward. Was making out with a drunk girl and she wanted to F and she said she was on birth control. We didn't F 'cause I didn't want to have sex with a drunk girl. 2 weeks later we're both sober and she wants to hook up but she wasn't on birth control, so I had to get condoms. Later on that night she told me she hasn't been on birth control in months. Scared the hell out of me. I was an accident. Usually my mom says like, oh, I always wanted kids and wanted to get pregnant young. But nope. During a wine-filled rant about life she revealed I was, in fact, an accident. I kinda figured. She was 17. I went to a dart tournament with an old college buddy last year, who is now married. Anyways, he hit it off with his fellow finalist who also happened to be sporting a wedding ring. The two got so plastered on the free drinks they won that soon the talk of tungsten shafts devolved into them having their tongues in one another with her hand on his shaft. She took an Uber to the bar, so my friend decides to be a gentleman. Tosses me the keys to his Tahoe and says we can drop her off. So he folds down the rear passenger seats and lays down a few blankets in the back for the drive. I try not to watch, but hey, sometimes a designated driver has to use the rear view mirror and it was pretty clear they were 69ing in the back. When I confronted my friend about his infidelity after we dropped her off, he confessed that it ain't cheatin' if you're both eatin'. But how can you do that? The dude was too drunk to realize I was referring to his presumed guilty conscience and instead provided me with a step-by-step guide on how I could also learn to neg women and speedily seduce them into 69ing in the back of my ride. It was terrifying. Someone was still quoting the game in 2018. When I was 16 I had a job as a dishwasher at a local bar. So being around drunk people was sort of the norm for me. Though one day, Steve, who is like a 50-something-year-old guy who works in the kitchen with me, comes and gets drunk on his day off. No big deal. Go ahead. It got weird though when he came into the kitchen and cried to me about how his boyfriend left him. And how good I could make him feel if I gave him a quick BLW job. Of course this caught me way off guard as I was 16 and I'm not even homosexual. So I just left the kitchen and found other stuff to do. I didn't really wanna talk to Steve after that. I quit the job shortly after anyway. A college friend was helping me clean a gash on the back of my head and was drunkenly trying to make me feel better. She did this by telling me about a time she had messed with her ex-boyfriend by blowing on his D when he asked her to blow him. He responded by smashing her head through a glass table. Well, that escalated quickly. I heard you have the biggest D from your friend group. Just because I don't have any friends. Having some drinks at my friend's house with her fiance. I've met this dude twice at this point. We were in the middle of a beer pong game when he says he has a confession. He then goes into a room and brings back this giant dildo. He proceeds to tell his fiance and myself he bought it because he likes to stick it in his while jacking off. I laugh instantly because I think the whole thing is a joke. I mean, why the F would you tell a stranger this? My friend, his fiance, goes to crying hysterically and I realize it is not a joke. He says he has had it for a few years now and has always wanted her to know, and he felt this was the perfect opportunity. I spent the rest of the night convincing my friend he still loves her and that doesn't change who he is. I mean, come on. Everyone has their fetishes. I do not judge in any way. But keep them private and to yourself and your significant other. I had been talking to a guy for a while. He was friends with my best friend. He had a crazy ex-GF who was trying to pin a bunch of S on him and called him abusive, etc. I didn't believe it because he was cute and I was young and dumb. One night we were over at my best friend's place drinking. And later on in the night when we all went to pass out, me and him in guest room, he started telling me how everything she said was true. And how he had put his hands around her neck and did all this other s. The next day he didn't remember anything and kept trying to kiss me, etc. I told my friend what had happened and we never spoke to him again after that also. His ex ended up pressing charges. So thankfully there was a little justice there.